Next up, we have Jorge Nunez representing the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium and some of their interests in dust and regolith across their different primary focus areas.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, and so I also want to acknowledge my co-author here, Dr. Ben Greenhagen, also from APL, and we're going to talk to you about the ongoing efforts within the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium as they pertain here within the LSIC focus areas related to dust and the regolith. Next slide, please. And so the NASA STMD created the Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative as a means to develop technologies that are needed to return humans to the surface of the moon. And what investments are needed to develop these technologies and mature them. And so they concentrated on these 6 focus areas that you see here that they identified as a need of some of these investments: in situ resource utilization, surface power, extreme access, surface excavation and construction, and lunar dust mitigation and lunar dust mitigation technologies. Right, and so, which is the area that I'm the facilitator, the focus area, and also extreme environments. And so these 2 are highlighted because these are what are related to dust and regolith. Next slide, please. And so what is the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium? And so the goal of the consortium, NASA approached APL to sort of stand up the consortium, which is the goal is to really harness the creativity and energy and resources of all the different stakeholders. And so this includes academia, industry, nonprofits, and government in order to really keep NASA and the United States at the forefront of lunar exploration. And so one of the key goals, right, is to identify lunar surface technology developments that are in most need of support and investment and be able to provide the communication between NASA and the community of what those needs are. And so with that, right, we hope that the LSIC serves as a resource, right, not only for gathering and dissemination of information, results, and also documentation, but also provide feedback to NASA. Next slide, please. So within the dust mitigation focus group, right, as we mentioned, right, the goal is to connect and harness creativity of the different stakeholders, right, to advance dust mitigation technologies that will enable exploration of the lunar surface and a return to the moon. And so we also identify needs, right, and determine how to address those critical challenges to NASA's dust mitigation needs. And so some key questions that are guiding this dust mitigation focus group, right, is what is the lunar dust environment, and in particular, as it relates to the lunar poles, right? Also, what role does water play with regards to dust? Also, since this is focused on dust mitigation technologies, right, what dust technologies are needed to enable operations on the lunar surface, right? Which dust mitigation technologies already exist, right? Are there things that are already have been developed? Are there things that are in the commercial sector that could be adapted for applications to the moon? Also, what gaps remain, right, that are in need of investment? And so which dust mitigation technologies need to be developed? And what is the pathway to develop these technologies that we can get them to a level for flight? And then also, how can NASA STMD mature these technologies? Next slide. And so within the dust mitigation focus area, right, there's sort of 6 overarching technologies areas that have been identified, right? Optical systems, thermal systems, like radiators, surfaces, fabrics, like suit fabrics, mechanisms, like actuator, joints, valves, seals and soft goods, like hatches, hoses, and then also areas of gaseous filtration, right? For example, like how they relate to ISRU processes. And so now I'm going to hand the baton to Ben, who will talk about efforts that are going on within his focus area.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm the facilitator for the Extreme Environments Focus Group. And so we're really, focusing on how the environment is a challenge to sustainable operations on the lunar surface. And so here you can see some questions that are very similar to what Jorge showed for dust mitigation, more in extreme environments like. But the takeaway here is how we're going about addressing these questions. So we've identified a series of tasks that we have started carrying out to kind of go through in a systematic way to characterize the extreme environment in terms of what the requirements are for technology development. That's our first task. And then what the capabilities, needs, gaps are in our second task. And our third task is evaluating and identifying facility needs, access, and what's currently available. Next slide. And similarly to dust, we also have different kind of sub-focuses. We've actually broken our focus group up into subgroups that have leaders from the community that are leading each of these groups through task one. Our different subgroups are thermal environment, so that's how the day-night is different, how polar is different from equatorial. We also have illumination environment, communications environment, solar wind plasma environment, radiation environment, vacuum environment, surface and subsurface interactions, and then other external hazards. The areas that are listed in green here with the little active tag on them are subgroups that have been stood up, and they have leads and they have supporters, and they are starting their work on task one. The two that are listed as planned, solar wind, plasma environment, and other hazards, are still in the organization phase. And then the purple ones are in discussions about exactly how we want to do this. And that's because of this gold text at the bottom. And that's, the ability to survive and operate in these extreme environments underlies all aspects of the Lunar Science Innovation Initiative. And many of these things are cross-cutting with other LSIC focus groups. Next slide. And so in terms of regolith specifically, both surface and subsurface regolith, there is some overlap here that we're working out. So in terms of extreme environments, our community has decided that we're really going to focus on the intrinsic properties of the lunar surface, except for dust, because dust is so important. It gets its own focus group, the dust mitigation focus group. So if it's an intrinsic property of the surface, such as the toxicity of the regolith or glassiness of the regolith, or organic content of the regolith, porosity variations, temperature-dependent properties, those are things that we are going to keep within extreme environments. But if it's related to actively doing things on the surface or to the lunar surface, those would go in two of our other focus groups that we haven't really talked about much. Extreme access for issues related to navigation, trafficability, getting into and out of these special environments, and excavation and construction for things like subsurface stratigraphy, how you operate in confined environments, and things like that. So dust and regolith, although there's a lot of activities in extreme environments and dust mitigation, also against these other areas as well. Next slide. And this is our final slide. I just wanted to, I'm having one of those cat moments that Ryan mentioned earlier. Just wanted to mention our website. It's lsic.jhuapl.edu. Please go check it out. This is how you can sign up to join LSIC. And there's lots of information on there. You can join any and all of the 6 focus groups, and that will get you invites to the regular meetings that we have. Every focus group at least meets monthly with a telecon. ISRU meets twice a month, and in terms of extreme environments, because we have these subgroups, there are additional tag-ups, Slack channels, and things like that to have those communications ongoing. We also receive updates and announcements. And we're going to be kicking off a Confluence wiki page for members also, where a lot of this information will be stored and shared in the very near future. And really, we want your institution to be able to contribute to this community, have that feedback in terms of research opportunities for these instrument developments, and help share the knowledge, because this really is an information gathering and dissemination community for these lunar technologies. And then just the final point here is our fall meeting, which will be our second meeting, is now scheduled for mid-October. And if you're interested in presenting a poster at that meeting, you can do that. There's information on the website as well. Thank you.
Thank you both. We have a couple of questions in the chat. And then Allison Lowndes put something in the chat, and we have a couple of questions in the Q&A about imaging dust against various surfaces, and then also work to understand van der Waals forces. And I think these are sort of open questions for the group, not necessarily specifically for Ben and Jorge.